Facebook for this session here. And we are live. Great. So welcome everybody. And I think we have all the guest speakers in the room already. Myriam, greetings, welcome to Zoom. You're on mute.
Hello.
Hello, glad to see you here, and thank you for joining Digital Collab 2020.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited to dive into the discussion and ideation.
Fantastic. So eager to listen from you. Judy, are you with us?
Hello,
Video
how are you doing?
Audio? Hi, Judy. Welcome. So good to see you again here. And thank
Likewise.
you for joining Digital Collab. It's really great to have you here. Let's see if Gary is joining us also from the US, and we'll start conversations in just a few minutes. And welcome everybody. Welcome back from the sessions. It's been a long day until today. We're starting already sessions at 4 p.m. in Singapore, China time. We had a lot of conversations going throughout the day so far. And this is stage 2, starting in just a few minutes. Well, we wait for all the guest speakers to be in the room. Let me just do a little bit of a revision of where we are in the agenda and in the Keynote chat, which is the space that we are using for this gathering, right? So thanks to Keynote chat, courtesy of Lucas Choppy, we are using this platform. As you see, we are now participating in the main stage. So this is the main stage where we are right now. Everybody will be joining this Zoom room here. So this is the agenda for our session, Digital Collab. So we have just at the stage 1, reframing my challenge, my purpose is done. We got the 2 Outspace boot camps and group map boot camps done, brilliantly done by their corresponding hosts. And now we are going to start the stage 2, deepening my practice and connecting to the whole. Hopefully having Gary Kayye joining us, as Judy and Myriam are already in the room, for a conversation on deepening my practice and connecting to the whole. So within the Keynote chat, you are able to find these stage pages where obviously you can read about all the conversations we had in stage 1 early this morning, this afternoon for Singapore, China participants. And now in the evening or in the morning for the US participants, we have stage 2 here, where you can all please type your comments here. I know that participants would normally like to chat over Zoom chat, that's okay. But if we put our ideas here, we'll be able to see how we're progressing throughout this event. And later today, we'll have also the chance to look at our stage 2 ideas and see how meaningful they are. Last but not least, it's really important that you can log in on Keynote chat so you can be listed in the world map here. If you do not log in and Keynote chat, then you will not be listed here. And I'm sure that we have participants from Singapore, China, actually, and other parts of the world. So if you'd be so kind to go back to the page here and register yourself according to your location, that would be great. Okay, so let's see if we have Gary on the line. I'm just checking. So I'm making our guest speakers as co-hosts so we can have visibility on them in the participant lists. And Judy, okay. And well, we might as well start if Gary is not joining us for some reason. He confirmed he will be here with us and probably joining at any minute now, but in cautious on the time and not make yourself. So perhaps we could start the conversations and think about how can we enter stage 2. Okay, so alphabetically, it will be Judy to start. But I know that in the program, it is Myriam is in the first place. I would say up to you, ladies, who wants to go first and break the ice in the conversation here for what brings us here today, the future of digital collaboration.
I'm very happy for Myriam to go first if she is.
Of course, I'm happy to jump in. And sure. So the topic of and just to clarify the purpose now, would you like me to start with a keynote that I prepared, or would you like me to just help you to kick off the conversation, waiting for the keynote speaker?
Well, I'm not sure Gary will show. When Gary will show up, he'll show up. You know, let's follow the rules of open space technology, because sometimes things happens and maybe he's prevented not to attend. So go ahead and talk. Do the presentation you have planned. Then Judy, and then Gary would come along in the end, perhaps. And if not, that's okay too.
Wonderful. So let me share just one screen to start with, because that's the topic of my little contribution today that I prepared for roughly 10 minutes. Cool. And I called it Dancing with the Status Quo. And the reason why I came up with that is because I thought that 2020 was a year of disruption for our facilitation industry. I remember very well, and I guess everyone who calls him or herself a facilitator also remembers very well. In March, suddenly, all our clients called us, and almost all the workshops that were scheduled got canceled. From one day to another, we were just without any jobs. Fast forward, September 2020, suddenly what has happened is we were all fully booked, and there was an avalanche of requests that overcame us. And what has happened in between is that the world has realized what it actually means to facilitate and how important it is to make collaboration easy as soon as it's moved out from the physical space into the virtual space. I would bet that in the understanding of what facilitation actually is has exploded between September and March 2020. So this still doesn't explain why I called my my keynote speech Dancing with the Status Quo. So the reason is that one concept that I think is about to enter the Oxford Dictionary, or might be the word of the year 2020, is Zoom fatigue. So since we all started to work from home, Zoom fatigue became a concept, and therefore also the understanding of what facilitation actually is. And as I was preparing to host an international global 24 hours online festival in November, everyone told me, Myriam, nobody's ever going to come to spend 24 hours in an online facilitation festival because we all suffer from Zoom fatigue and we just cannot do it anymore. And I was wondering, why is that? Where does Zoom fatigue actually come from? And why is it that actually at the end, people did show up to the festival that I was hosting? And the festival was called, bold enough, Never Done Before. So I was wondering, where does Zoom fatigue come from, and why did the concept of never done before still attract so many people to join an online festival, given that we all no longer want to sit in front of our screens? So here we go. So what I came up with was that we suffer from Zoom fatigue because we are too much exposed of just the same. We're using the same tools, we're using the same structures, we're using the same channels most of the time. And why are we doing that? And I think, and I would love to hear your critical voices about that afterwards, because maybe I'm totally wrong, But what I came up with is that we are sitting in our own facilitation bubble, and we don't give ourselves space or opportunities to really experiment with new tools and new techniques. So although all these tools are mushrooming, we still stick to the same. And why is that? So I think it's mostly a fear of failure. It's a fear to experiment, and there's a lack of opportunity to actually try out. So from what I know, the International Association of Facilitators really provides the space for fellow facilitators to collaborate, experiment, and maybe try out new things, but it's a minority. So what I realized is that many facilitators don't dare to go out and to experiment together. There's always this kind of voice in the background. Am I good enough? There's so much competition. But I think what we really need is a playground of where we can really collaborate with each other and play with each other, to dance with the status quo, so that new ways of collaboration can emerge and we can enjoy the fun of virtual collaboration, even if it's the only thing there is, because we cannot collaborate in the physical space. So what I'm mostly interested in, and this is where I would like to guide this conversation, is a concept or is the origin of why we don't collaborate enough. And one thing that comes to my mind immediately is that maybe the cake is too small. So we are afraid of collaboration, and if we see too much competition. And we're afraid of collaboration if we fear that that the share for us is not big enough. What I learned in my economics time as an economist is, if the cake is too small, there are two possibilities. One is we can compete and thereby reduce the number of mouths we want to feed. The other opportunity is we just increase the size of the cake. And then there's enough space or enough cake for all of us. And I think that with the Corona outbreak in 2020, it's our opportunity of facilitators to really collaborate, because the cake just became huge, because the entire world realized how relevant facilitation is, and that it's actually something that needs to be mastered, because you don't have successful workshops or successful meetings just out of the blue, just by putting people onto a Zoom channel, onto a Zoom call, and suddenly they have fantastic ideas. No, you actually need to facilitate this process. So I believe that due to Corona, the cake just increased. So the era of facilitators has just started, and now it's our opportunity to actually use this chance to really make the best out of it. And therefore, I think that given that all these tools have mushroomed out of it over the past months, I think that also, and we know that we have to use each tool depending on the purpose of our session. What if there's also no more restriction in the amount of facilitators, because we can all be unicorns and find our markets just as much as all these tools have found their markets. And therefore my claim is we can fight Zoom fatigue by just having more fun together and learning from each other. And this is basically, I don't know whether the loud tone was the signal for me to stop. But I guess this was. So yes, this was my little kind of nugget.
Thank you so much. May I ask a round of applause, virtual applause to Myriam for sharing these great ideas and insights and powerful insight. It got us really thinking on this bigger cake that we need to share. Okay, cool. I think that Kayye is now on the Zoom room with us. Gary, maybe you can show your video now, and apologize because you were stuck on Google Meet. I forgot that, Gary, I think we have in the line. And definitely perhaps on the interest of the program, and if Judy agrees, Gary, you could fill in now with your presentation on the collaboration. Gary, are you with us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay, apologize for having you stuck on the Google Meet. I'm really sorry. I'm glad that you're here with us. So we already started in the interest of the hour. So Myriam had advanced their presentation. Judy has already a presentation ready. But I think we are all curious to hear from you, Gary, because you perhaps also would like to introduce yourself in this community of mostly facilitators, you know, people from a different kind of industry that you normally address, which is the collaboration, technology, AV world. So Gary, over to you, a brief introduction, and maybe you'd like to share your thoughts with us. And then over to Judy, and then we start the conversation with all the participants here, because our purpose really is to get a shared learning outcome of this time we are spending here together on the solstice day. I would say winter solstice in the North Hemisphere and summer solstice in the South Hemisphere, right? Gary, over to you.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry I was not aware of the Zoom room when the invitation came, so I wasn't sure what to do. So Ray and I were hanging out in the Google Meet by ourselves, and we weren't sure what was going on. So I believe that after I introduce myself, Paul, you're going to ask me a series of questions. And so I'll just give you a little bit of background. I've been in the AV and collaboration space for 30 years. Started with Extron. I was their 15th or 16th employee, and then went to AMX, who's now part of Harman, and then started my own consulting firm that was specifically focused on brands, and then also started a creative agency to help those brands in the industry. During that time, I started a publication called Rave, R-A-V-E. And we have one of our publications, one of our newsletters covers the collaboration space. So we do a lot of research and a lot of information gathering, a lot of surveying of the collaboration market to keep up with what's going on specific around collaboration. Obviously 2020 was not a year that anyone predicted, but it's been obviously a breakout room for a year for collaboration. The biggest thing that is obvious, I think everyone knows, is that there's our website. The biggest thing that everyone knows is that that's our agency website, not the publication website, but is that there's been a commoditization of video. And basically what that means is the death of audio conferencing. There's nobody who's going to ask for an audio conferencing room in the future, or for a room to accommodate audio conferencing. Every room and every space that's built from now going forward will have video in it. So the concept of speaker phones or audio only devices is going to go away pretty rapidly because everyone's gotten used to video. And the positive net effect of that is that collaboration will be brought into all spaces. If you kind of go back 3 years ago, collaboration was mostly talked about in meeting rooms and huddle spaces. And that's what people were talking about collaborating on. When I go to a meeting, I want to be able to collaborate with someone else in another room, in another meeting somewhere else in the world or wherever they are. But now we see collaboration brought into schools, hospitals, hotels, pretty much everywhere. So collaboration will be sort of a normal thing, and collaboration will include video and audio always, not just audio. People will expect video. And the other thing that I think is interesting that's come out of this with regard to collaboration is the fact that we've been sort of, during this period of time, all of us have been experiencing what I would call death by meeting, where we're all shoved into meetings constantly. And we're finding a lack of efficiency in these. And I think that that's going to create more processes and better workflow. We haven't done it yet, but I think a lot of the companies that are in the collaboration space will help out with that quite a bit. There's some up and coming companies out there that maybe you've never even heard of. There's a company called Bluescape, for example, that offers a collaboration space, a virtual collaboration space. It's a SaaS-based product. You pay per seat license, and it incorporates Zoom and Meet and Teams inside of it. But what happens is, as a company or as an organization, you're all working on the same desktop space or the same virtual digital collaboration space, which means that instead of emailing a document to somebody, the document is already there. Instead of joining a Zoom call, you join inside of Bluescape on whatever platform the other person has. You don't really have to think about it. It's sort of built into your normal workflow. And I think that 2021 will sort of bring that opportunity as well, where organizations rethink their workflow and think about digital collaboration equal to analog collaboration. Whereas before, we always thought of the person who was joining remotely or the person who was collaborating only digitally with a document as less important as everyone else that was there live in the meeting. Not intentionally, but more subconsciously. We see ourselves and the people surrounding us as the important people, and the people that are joining remotely, unless they yell and scream or virtually raise their hand, they don't get any attention. And I think that we're going to see a flattening of all of that, because a lot of us will be joining by means like this, like Zoom. One of the things that you hear from Lieven Berthier in his next session, he will talk about how the vision that Barco has for meetings is very interesting, because his vision is that people will want to join a meeting regardless of where they are and make it as seamless as possible, not just in the physical room space. So the room space will still exist, but maybe there'll be more room spaces, and people will be joining in the same building from multiple room spaces. So for example, let's say you have a meeting room in your facility now that used to seat 6 people. Well, with new social distancing, which will last another year or two, now that room can only fit 2 people. Well, there's still going to be 4 people in this meeting. So the other 2 people might go to another meeting room in the same building on the same floor. And the 4 of you are meeting half virtual and half in person inside the same facility. And there might even be a 5th person that you bring into the meeting that's sitting in their cubicle. And Barco's ClickShare conference allows you to do that. It's kind of an interesting concept of bringing it all together. And hopefully he'll talk about that. I'm assuming he'll talk about that.
Unfortunately, Kayye is not able to join us, but you send a video that we are going to show in stage 3. But I'm so in love with the conversation you bring to this group. I would like to ask thumbs up, thumbs down to the participants if you're enjoying this sharing so far. Thumbs up or thumbs down, please. And thank you. And then Kayye, it's excellent because you bring a fresh perspective from the technology world. So tell us a little bit about the future, right? How do you see the future of collaboration? A little bit more than what you already said. There's a paradigm change here. So where do you see the opportunities for the human element in this particular new scenario that you have just highlighted?
Well, I think that we're all experiencing all 2-dimensional conversations right now. Like we're on here 2-dimensional. None of us are here in person, and I think that that's create a situation where people are having a recognition of the fact that now they're on the other side. They were always in the meeting room and they were always sort of in charge, and now they're on the other side and equal to everyone else that's online. And I think you're going to see a lot of tools that leverage that, a lot of tools that bring us closer together, make us feel more comfortable in this situation. But more importantly to me, make it less death by meeting, meaning more efficient. One of the problems that we have is the meeting efficiency. No one goes and schedules a 12-minute meeting. All the meetings are scheduled for 30 minutes or an hour. So what happens is, even though the meeting could have happened in 12 minutes, it ends up being a 30-minute meeting because you do all the stuff at the beginning that's useless time and do all the stuff at the end. And then they have the filler in the middle that's useless time. And that's making for less efficiency. That's why all of us are getting off our computers at 6:30 at night every night instead of at 5 o'clock when we would normally leave the office, because we've got all this extra filler time that's wasting all those in between times that we would have normally gotten up and gone to the water cooler or gotten up and gotten coffee or even go to the bathroom. Raise your hand if you've realized at 2 o'clock in the afternoon you have yet to use the bathroom today. I mean, it's not something that people normally talk about, but you forget, like, oh my gosh, I've been sitting here for 6 hours and I forgot to get up and use the bathroom, because we're in this digital realm that's not been normalized for us. But what's good about this from our standpoint of the industry, and we're helping, we consult with a lot of these brands, Burco included, is that we are now realizing where the holes are. And we're going to now fix a lot of these holes and create new ways to collaborate that'll make it more human, more participative, more. I mean, look at Zoom itself. Just in the last year, look how much better Zoom is now than it was a year ago. Let's forget about the security issues. Just the user interface and the features that you have available to you that you didn't have before are substantially different, substantially better. So I think the future of it is just as I said earlier, video and audio is going to be everywhere. There's no such thing as audio conferencing anymore. Anyone that was an audio conferencing manufacturer is going to go out of business if they don't add video collaboration. No one's going to say, we got to build an audio conferencing facility. Even podcasters have gone to video during this pandemic as well. A lot of podcasts that you probably listen to, they're also just turning on their cameras and you can just kind of watch them talk at the microphone, and people are doing it. People are watching them talk to the microphone. So I think that, that's going to be a great outcome of this, is that we're going to get better at this and we're going to see it everywhere. One other thing I will say about that, where you were in the position that you're in and what you were doing and the way you're working on November 1st is exactly the way you will be and how you'll be working on November 1st, 2021. Whether you like to hear that or not. I can tell you all the data that we're collecting with regard to helping manufacturers through this, but we will all still be in the same position we were in November 1st, 2021 as we were November 1st, 2020. That means that we really have to get a lot better at this, because we have to make that time efficiency thing better and that ability to collaborate. Like I'm sure you've all been on meetings before where you're like, let's all go look at something. And then there's this one person that can't see it, or this one person that can't collaborate on it. And that throws that's another 4 or 5 minutes in the meeting to realize that they just haven't turned something on because they're just not used to using it. And so I think that we can't count on the technology tools to fix the problem. We need to fix the processes and then let the tools adapt to the processes. And that's something we weren't prepared for. Absolutely,
Gary. I'm so thrilled to hear you say that, because the previous guest speaker that Myriam said predecessors you and Judy Rees, I think they have a lot to contribute. And Judy, I don't know if you'd like to step in here for the moment with some question, or you'd like to add your bit, and then we'll have a dialogue all together.
Okay, shall I dive in with my little bit?
That would be cool, and then we'll have a conversation, the three of you and the rest of the group if they want to step in. Would that be okay for everybody? Okay, cool. Thank you so much, Kayye. I loved your inputs, and now let's hear from Judy, and then we start the conversation all together. Judy, over to you.
Okay, so unsurprisingly, my experience of the last few months has been different from Gary's and different from Myriam's. At the beginning of the lockdown, I was grabbed by Martin Gilbraith to help him with a piece of facilitation, taking a large European conference out of the room and online in the space of 2 weeks, and it was brilliant fun, but we haven't stopped since. I was doing a lot of online facilitation before the lockdowns, and I've been doing even more all year, and my focus has been mostly on working with global organizations, NGOs in particular, a lot of whom have had participants in their events in places where the internet might not be brilliant, And of course, people are working from home, and their homes in Africa or in the Middle East, wherever, are not necessarily the same as the homes in the UK, where I am, or in America. They're different. And that, for me, is one of the big themes around digital collaboration that's emerging right now, is how do we extend our digital collaboration to fulfill more of the potential for including a much wider range of people from all over the world in our events, in our conversations, in our collaborations in general. Let me just mention a couple of specific things that have emerged in the last, well, this morning I was teaching a group of trainers and facilitators. This was the second half-day training of the training we do. It's basically, how do you do, if you're great in the room trainer or facilitator, how do you do that online? And for one of those participants, the big thing that had changed since last week was that she'd finally, after months of trying, managed to figure out how to see the group on Zoom and a document at the same time. For some people, that sounds ridiculously trivial, but it's not trivial for her. For other people on that call, in the last week, they'd found opportunities to rearrange an entire event schedule so that instead of the plodding pace of long talks followed by long breakouts, they were able to exploit the fact that we can do lightning breakouts in Zoom and that we can quickly call people back from the room. We don't have to spend ages wandering around the breakout groups with a bell or whatever. And they were experimenting with all sorts of other things. Another set of ideas that emerged from that group was around inclusion and diversity. We had 2 Muslim women on the call, and we started talking about video reluctance. Why might people not want to turn on their cameras? And of course, in the UK and in America, we blithely say, well, people don't turn on their cameras because they want to do their emails at the same time as the event. That may or may not be true. But for these 2 women, they brought in some different perspectives. Not only the kind of perspectives that I'd heard from my groups earlier in the year, such things as, well, it's a problem with bandwidth. I'm not sure that I'll be able to be heard and seen. And because there are, if I turn on my camera, I start to freeze. Well, that's an important thing. Or something like, well, I'm not calling from a quiet place with a nice tidy white background and super lighting. I'm calling from a 1-room house and I've got 5 children in my background. It's not okay for me to turn on the camera. No, these ladies, they offered a different perspective. They said, well, we're veiled. Unless you can tell us that there are no men going to be on the call, that means if we turn on our cameras, we have to keep our headscarves on. And that means it's bloody hot. It's really, really uncomfortable. And I just never thought of that before. And every time we have another conversation about the potential for attracting a more diverse group of people, at the same time, there's the other side, which is that blithely saying, oh, everybody's on video now, audio's gone, we're also stretching people's capabilities. And a related issue emerged. I was running my 5th edition of the annual Clean Language online event, which is called Metaforum. It's an open space inspired online unconference. It lasts for 13 hours, so we can include people all over the world, a bit like this event. And each year since 2016, we've made it a little bit more like an in the room open space. We've tried to make it more self-organized. We've tried to make it more human. We've tried to make it more that people can control the space themselves and that it's not so top down. The very first time I ran it, I was terrified. I didn't think that we could do open space online. I actually booked a single track of big name speakers and said, we'll still have five additional rooms, but there's always going to be something going on. Honest, you can come. And that, of course, had different effects on the number of people who were willing to propose a session. This time, we didn't have any of that. We said, come along, you can propose a session in real time at our opening of the space. We'll do 3 of those during the course of the day, propose a session, put your sticky notes on the board, all of that thing. But the sticky note tool we were using was sticky notes on a Google slide. And in our initial tests, some people found that really, really hard to do. So we started writing. I got one of my assistants to write the sticky notes for people and put them on the board. As the day progressed, one of the open space facilitators who was there got more and more angry, to the point where at the second opening, she said, I can't stand this a moment longer. I have to say, this is no longer open space as I recognize it. I'm proposing a session on the relationship between this event and open space, and I hope 1 or 2 people will come and hear what open space is about. And it turned out, of course I went along, it turned out to be an absolutely fascinating discussion about the relationship between clean language, open space, this event, and so on and so forth. But the point I want to make is that by writing the sticky notes for people, we'd gone beyond what this particular facilitator thought was okay to do online. Meanwhile, we were doing it because some people were telling us they needed help to use the tools. When we're in the room together, everybody knows how sticky notes work. Everybody knows how to grab a Sharpie. And everybody's got the technology to do it. As soon as we go online, if some people don't have the bandwidth, or if some people don't have the screen real estate, or if some people don't have the technical know-how to use the tools, where does that leave us as facilitators? So I don't have easy answers to the question, but I do think that this is a question that we as facilitators, as digital facilitators, online facilitators, virtual facilitators, remote facilitators, we need to consider, where does the line come between us being willing to use digital technology in an effective way, in a way that works for our most advanced, our most mature participants, and at the same time not leaving people behind just because they haven't got the kit or the skill. But if we help people, do we disempower them? When we help people, do we disempower them? I'd love to have a conversation about some of the issues that arise from all of that. And I think that's about 9.5 minutes, so I'm going to stop.
Thank you so much, Judy. Thank you for this, and it's amazing. I do see that there's a little bit of several overlapping areas here in terms of what Gary just presented, a perspective on collaboration. And by the way, if you're going to the Wikipedia about the definition of facilitation, the Wikipedians differentiate between business facilitation and what is normally could be like community facilitation. Different types of projects can happen with digital technologies, right? And I'm sure that we could find similarities between the challenges of what the future will bring in terms of the use of digital tools for collaboration, regardless of what we are going to do. But anyway, Myriam, would you like to ask some question to Gary Kayye presentation? Because I think you would arrive, you were the first to do the presentation and didn't have you got any curiosity about what Gary just presented and ask him a question? So we start like a dialogue between the 3 of you guest speakers for the moment, and then we'll share to the rest of the group the conversation.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I think instead of asking Gary a question, I would like maybe to link the two presentations of Judy and Gary by something that Judy also pointed out, and that really triggers my curiosity, which is the relevance of video and inclusivity. Because Gary was very clear that, okay, in the future, we won't have video again. And then Judy pointed out very rightly so, I think, how much the presence of video actually points out inequalities amongst participants, not only regional inequalities that you can see the background suddenly and the space where someone is in, but also maybe in terms of bandwidth. And I have made the experience that hosting meetings or workshops on avatar-based tools totally changes the dynamics in the group, especially when it comes to cultural differences and cultural backgrounds. So I would be curious about Gary's perspective of the relevance of video in the perspective of inequality and cultural differences and differences in bandwidth.
When I was saying that we would be using video, I wasn't saying cameras. I was saying video, meaning we still can have audio present, but no one's going to build an audio-only facility. So even the example that Judy gave used video because you had the collaboration of annotation and the post-it notes or the posting of the notes there. So I wasn't necessarily saying people have to turn on their cameras. But we're going to be collaborating visually. We're not going to be collaborating with just our voice any longer. So I think that's why I was saying that tools like Bluescape are going to be critical in the future, because although you do have a camera capability on Bluescape through Teams or through Zoom or any of the other collaboration platforms, it gives you full document collaboration, and they're just an example. Nareva with the Span product, as well as another example, the Span software. But we'll be collaborating visually because that's the way people work. When you look at retention data, I teach at the University of North Carolina. I teach marketing there. And it's a fact that even if you put up a PowerPoint slide with just one simple word on it without all your notes, that the retention level of the classroom of the students goes up at some level, whether it's 1%, 5%, depending on whose data you believe. It can be as high as 15%. So people remember things visually much quicker than they remember them any other way. So therefore, I think this video collaboration isn't just all about cameras as much as it is about anything visual. But I agree that there are cultural issues that everyone will have to deal with. And I think that, over time, you're going to see the collaboration platforms get better at it.
And one thing that I'm missing in all this tool discussion is the basics and the art of facilitation and putting the purpose before the process and before the tools, because there's so many tools now that I think, often forget to think, okay, what is the purpose of the gathering, of the meeting, of the workshop, or the online session, and what is the best online tool that we can find for that? Because yes, maybe sometime it is a video, but maybe sometimes it is a conversation without video and without digital notes and without visuals, because you go deeper on a very different level. So isn't it the core of our profession to make the process and collaboration easy, and thinking of the process first?
I think you're absolutely right, Myriam. And I think that when cameras are on in Zoom, that gives a huge amount of visual stimulation. And I think that most people prefer to watch a video stream, if there is one, rather than just listen. I think this idea that the podcasters are now doing video and people are willing to sit there and watch them just talking to a microphone is quite telling. People like to watch human faces. The research shows that even tiny babies will look preferentially at a human face rather than moving objects and all those kind of things. So I think it makes sense to have video on, but it opens up these other challenges. And that that brings me to a question that I have for you, Myriam, which is about what you were saying about Zoom fatigue and people's willingness or unwillingness to use various tools to break up the boredom. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
I have the impression that we stick too much on our comfort zone. So we know how to use Zoom, so we stick to Zoom. We know how to guide a group through a process, so we stick to this process because it's comfortable. But so I'm a podcaster. I interview facilitators, and I realized that there's so much creativity. There's so much more in our profession that we actually don't use. So I was wondering how we can actually find more opportunities to experiment with all these tools that are now made available, to really also find the purpose of each tool and not just rely on the one that is either just in fashion or that is the only one that is not blocked by a corporate. But to really be purposeful of the use of the tools. Does it make sense?
It does. I think it raises another challenge.
I'm Peter from Singapore. I'd like to add something.
Yeah, I think, sure, Peter, go ahead. And Gary, maybe you take your notes for the answer afterwards.
Yeah.
Peter.
I totally agree. I one person, I'm a professional facilitator at IAF. I'm one person who actually, on the other hand, did not quite like the term process facilitator because I somehow felt that sometimes even my peers focus too much on process rather than actually the intended outcome for the sessions. Let me give you an illustration. If we don't have online, for example, and we go into basic face-to-face, sometimes we are also overwhelmed with so much tools, right? We use post-it note, we use sticky wall, we stick everywhere, right? So the syndromes kind of put it now transfer over to online, and yet people are going goggle or mad or crazy about different type of tools, and we're all busy learning the tools and forget what is really important in the room. What is important in the room is, why are we here? What is the intention of we having a conversation? Sharing an example, 4 months ago, I did a session for 500 people. I had supposed to be online, face-to-face, but I have to convert this to online. And I wonder how I'm going to do it because it's a strategic planning, a shared vision, and it involves different levels of management and staff. And some staff do not know even how to use smartphone, and I'm going to put them online, right? So instead of going crazy over the online, I did a very simple thing. I actually talked to the HR. I say, okay, let's have a phone call. Let's have a conversation first before I brought them online. And that process kind of guided them to when they're actually in the sessions, even though they are in audio, but they were able to participate without even the video. So really the intention of pulling people together, why are you in the room, is more important. And I will call that the intention setting. The intention setting is so important. And that's why in IAF, we have the competencies, and the number one competency, A, is client engagement or client relationship. It's all about understanding what is the purpose of the conversation. What are we solving in the room? Yeah. So I'd just like to add on to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Over to you, Gary, about these comments, because you are almost in what I would say a hostile environment, right? Lots of facilitators and one insider from the collaboration technology industry world.
So what's happening in collaboration with the technology is a re-engineering of the technology based on the workflows and the processes that people use. COVID-19 was not something anyone expected. So everyone just assumed that we'd always be meeting in person whenever we had conferences and needs to meet in person. But it's going to be 4 or 5 years before we're able to do that comfortably, assuming that we can in a normal way. I mean, I know a lot of facilitators and a lot of organizations that believe that they'll be back to normal in a year or two. But the truth of the matter is, if you look at the real data, more than 60% of the people in any country, there's no country that's lower than 60%. Actually, they don't trust meeting in person anytime in the next 12 to 24 months. I mean, no country is higher than 60%. So therefore, even if we have a vaccine. You know, I was in the Pfizer trial. I was one of the 30,000 people that took the Pfizer vaccine. And I felt perfectly comfortable. But my own sister says she won't ever take the vaccine and has never taken vaccines. So the issue is there's going to be this conflict with getting together in person and getting together versus staying online, which is going to produce a hybrid model. And when you're in a hybrid model, and that hybrid model is going to live for a while, maybe it's going to be 2 or 3 years, maybe it's 4 years. All conferences, all events will have to use some sort of hybrid model if they want to keep the audience. Meaning, if they had 700 people that joined before, if they're okay with 200 or 300 people joining a year from now or 2 years from now, then that's great. If they want to get to 700, they're going to have a hybrid model where some people are going to be joining online. You're going to have to find some way to make the people who are joining online feel like the experience was worth it and they were part of the group. And you can't do that without video. If you look at all the data, you've got to have video. People do not feel connected to conferences without some level of video. Now, I don't mean necessarily cameras, but some sort of visual connection.
Sorry, I have to move so much because there are different things that come to my mind. First is the gaming industry. People spend hours and hours, feel highly connected to other human beings across the world. They don't see on videos, just through a video game. And these are very connected communities. They start to chat and they talk about also personal matters. So that's the one thing. The second thing is that I totally agree. I don't think that we're going to go back to normal. But I highly doubt that hybrid models will be the solution, because I think it's either you're in or you're out, but to connect the two, I think it's very difficult. The problem I see with online collaboration is that we always try to replicate the on-site, the physical space, and we totally neglect the opportunities that we have in online spaces that we didn't have offline. Something like breakout rooms that creates so much intimacy that you will never be able to create in an on-site space, which is just one thing. And the other thing is that online, we just have we're competing with someone's living room, with someone's family, instead with someone's office and the office coffee machine. So the opportunity costs of joining an online event are much higher. So this is what we have to face. It is, what kind of content are we delivering? What kind of connection are we creating? And what kind of online connection can we facilitate that is actually able to compete with someone's couch? Sorry, I get very passionate.
Thank you so much, Myriam. Judy, over to you.
Where my attention is just going is thinking about the kind of events like conferences and where we might be in a couple of years, and will hybrids work? And I know that one of the big challenges that the events industry, as distinct from the facilitation industry, the events industry has stressed to anything about the fact that sponsorship is not working in online events, that nobody's found a way to make exhibition booths work online in any serious way. And that's going to still be the same. And I happen to agree that I don't think hybrid really is going to work for the kind of conference setup. And I think that until somebody can figure out how to make online sponsorship work and online exhibition booths work, I think that that's a reason for not doing hybrids, because the people who are in the physical space will get the sponsor experience and the others won't. But it seems like it should be such a trivial problem, but it turns out not to be. And yeah, so I'm not coming up with answers, but I am coming up with questions. I'm thinking, how might we as facilitators help to solve this problem that the events industry has? And this is touching back to what Myriam was saying, the cake potentially for facilitators who can work well online together is potentially absolutely enormous. because we know how to create the kind of human connections that need to happen, for example, for that handshake that produces a sale for the sponsor.
Yes. And sorry, I
think it's Gary. Gary wants to respond to that. Gary, go ahead.
So there's an analogy to this, okay? Judy brought up a really good point about the sponsorships and how that, how that's an important factor, because that's how you pay for all these conferences, right? No one really pays for conferences based on attendees as much anymore as they used to, say, 10 or 15 years ago. But there's a perfect analogy to this, and it's in the industry that I've been in my entire life and the industry that I teach in, and that is advertising. So advertising used to only be analog, and people made a ton of money selling ridiculous prices for back page ads and back cover ads and things like that. And when it went digital, you were literally trading dollars for dimes and pennies. So the same publication that was charging $5,000 or $10,000, or in the case of the Wall Street Journal, $60,000, or Financial Times, $68,000 for a back cover section ad, online is now charging $1,200, $1,600, $1,800 for the same basic spot, but it's a digital spot. So that industry, all you have to do is look at history. If you don't look at history, you're not being smart. There's a model to fix this. You won't get that sponsorship money back. It will never come back. And I can tell you, the industry's going to go hybrid. You're going to have to do hybrid to survive. You will not get the sponsorship money back. There is no way to do that. What you're going to have to do is do what Facebook and Google have done, and that is, instead of selling exposure and awareness, you have to sell data. That's the value. That's the value in digital events versus analog, is I can gather a ton more data. My company created a hybrid event platform with the help of Zoom 2 years ago, because we saw this opportunity coming about. Where we make our money is not in providing the platform. Where we make our money is in knowing what people want and knowing what people are doing in the platform, watching what they're doing and seeing how they're using the stuff in the platform. That's the value. So you're correct. Instead of having 3 or 4 big sponsors spend hundreds of thousands or maybe tens of thousands of dollars to sponsor something, you're going to have 300 sponsors who are going to spend much, much smaller amount of money to be able to support the event. And I'm just encouraging you, or basically begging you, to keep this model in mind, because the model of big sponsorship money coming back is not going to come back, because our biggest clients are companies like Samsung, LG, Epson, and their advertising dollars are shifting away from live events money because they don't see it coming back.
I wonder whether this isn't just an illusion. So I think that the online, or the working from home, this online world is an amplifier, which just shows what was wrong in the first place already in the physical space. So back then it was easy to just quickly sell sponsor space that nobody was even looking at, or maybe people would go there because they know that they get the free kind of blog and a Sharpie for free, and that's why they go there, but actually nobody was interested in. Now in the online space, the sponsors have to come up with content. And I think, as you say, Gary, we have to look at history. Yes, where did marketing go over the last years? It went to content marketing. Nobody clicks on an ad just because the ad is there. No, we click on an ad if they're telling a story, if they're speaking to a need or a pain that we have. So what if sponsors is not about data in the future, but about content? And then, yes, we might have less sponsors, but then at least we can also match the sponsors to the target group to actually create some value together.
But the truth of the matter is, they won't spend the same amount of money for digital as they did in analog. There is no correlation.
Why not?
Money has to, well, because if you follow the advertising industry, it's the same way. It's never come back. The amount of money's never come back. In fact, if you look at the data, Facebook alone sells more ads than every newspaper and magazine in the world combined.
Wow, that's a big figure. That's a big figure.
It's a big figure, exactly. So you know, where we're talking about analog ads versus digital ads. If you put Facebook, Google, and Amazon together, those three companies together are nearly 70% of the digital advertising spend in the world.
And I wonder about the relative size, because the exposure is also much larger, right? No magazine in the world can have the same exposure as a Facebook or Google. So I think if you boil it down and look at the relative size, it might not be that different, maybe. Just a guess.
But you're spending, you know, $2.50 for the impression or the exposure at Facebook versus the magazine. You were having to spend $5,000 or $10,000 and you never got any impression data.
Absolutely. It's a challenging debate. Judy, you want to step in, or should we move on to the discussion? Because I have here questions from the chat, and I also like to participants to step in and chip in, taking advantage of this incredible panel.
I'm super curious about what John Hovell has to say, because he's saying he's got a different view, just as I was saying, let's make sure we got the different views.
Okay, John, you want to step in on a different view here?
No pressure amongst a group of international experts, right? Thanks, Judy. I don't know. I do appreciate it. I think what's being challenged for me in the moment, and I'm like I said in the chat, I notice my own discomfort, and I'm happy with that. I view it as a learning space. There's so much like blended. Learning and development folks for decades have said absolutely never ever run a blended event ever. It doesn't work. Can't do it. We've tried and tried and tried. Stop it. Find everybody in the same room or everybody virtual. And then diversity and inclusion came in over the years and said, absolutely agree, because when you do blended, you have power dynamics that you can't resolve. So I've had this reinforcement of what facilitation and learning and multiple culture events look like. And then I'm hearing these views of, oh no, try blended and audio, no video. And I'm thinking, oh, right. So that was all challenged. And then, yeah, I guess where it all kind of started, a whole other perspective on, I come from the field of organization development, and in OD, we're looking at power and influence and group dynamics and human behaviors first. Process and technology and information and software are a much different perspective. So I heard quite a focus on that. So that's helpful for me to be with a couple of, I'm privileged to have a bunch of degrees in information technology. So I'm really comfortable with tools, and yet have spent now decades, forget the tools, focus on the humans. And so this chat was bringing me back to the software tech. And I thought, I've kind of purposefully moved away from that for a while. So there you go. That's on the fly, thinking out loud. I don't know if that adds anything. I'm sitting in some discomfort and enjoying it.
Thank you so much, John. Blended learning, Gary, would that be something that, I mean, according to you, yes, hybrid is going to be the future, right?
Yeah, in fact, you know, find any university in the entire world that isn't trying to build hybrid or high flex classrooms. Find a single one, because they recognize that that's the way. Go ahead.
And going out of business.
Yeah, right? Exactly. They're going to either go out of business if they don't do it. And then you have, you know, and you have the traditional online universities. No traditional online university isn't using video of some type. You're not teaching through audio. I think that the truth of the matter is that it is in everyone's best interest to consider the fact that, similar to like cultural concerns, you're going to have to respect someone's health concerns. Some people just aren't going to be comfortable going into large groups anymore. I don't know what the data is outside the United States, but Pfizer and Moderna are predicting somewhere between 20 and 30% of the citizens in the US won't take the vaccine for the first 2 years. That's a big chunk of people sitting there that aren't vaccinated, that concern everyone that has been vaccinated, but also concerns everyone that hasn't been vaccinated. And then you have Pfizer and Moderna both saying the vaccine hasn't been tested yet on people under the age of 16, so don't vaccinate them yet. We're not finished with that testing. So there's going to be a period, if we're just looking at the current issues. Now, if we jump forward 10 years from now and science has solved all these virus problems and we're all good, the truth of the matter is that, like what happened with the digital world, where all of us, like, I mean, think about everything. I mean, with the exception of breathing and eating, we pretty much do everything else online. We get our TV online now. We get our entertainment online now. Myriam went into the whole video gaming thing. You know, what's in front of the video game players? A big screen filled with video. Yes, they're talking to other people, but they're talking to the avatars of the other people. So those avatars represent visual humans, or their co-players or competitors. And so if you look at what's happened with the online world, dating, like who goes on a date in the analog world compared to the digital world? Like it's the data is staggering. Everyone starts their communication digitally. Even if you do have an analog date that you didn't meet online first, the conversations start in the digital world through text communications and through FaceTime and things like that. We're going to have to incorporate video. We're going to have to incorporate hybrid and HyFlex. And I would encourage you all to take a second look at this, because if you looked at it 2 years ago, it's a lot different than it was 2 years ago.
Absolutely.
I would like to bring the conversation back to facilitation, actually, and what all this means to. So is the future of facilitation then digital facilitation? To what extent do we need to master the tools in order to keep masters of our profession? And to what extent becomes maybe facilitation a key skill that every manager, every team leader, every citizen needs to learn, because we are collaborating online only, and then facilitation becomes a key skill.
Who wants to step in?
Hi, it's Mike from Toronto. Hi, folks. Thank you so much. I just want to say, as a facilitator, I believe in the future, we will have to become masters of technology for digital purposes. There will be groups who will be calling us to do in-person events. Again, that will be happening. And I have to agree with Gary, there will have already a friend of mine in March, even before it was declared a pandemic, people were doing it virtually, and he was in the room with people as well. And so they had to develop a strategy where the people in room were moving the camera. Someone was responsible for mobilizing the laptop that everyone was who were online looking through, and that person was responsible to move the camera so the speakers could be seen. So I do believe we're going to have to deal with both at different times, just based on people who are not going to come in. And we have to master the technology for those who will be online, or if we have online things. As a facilitator, I don't know if I'm going to really have the option to say, you know what, it's going to have to be either or. I think the client is going to be dictating that to us.
Thank you so much, Martin. Check guest speakers, Myriam, Judy, Gary.
I'm getting interested in, well, as facilitators who've been good in the room, in the moment, when people get together, and now moving online, is our future not just potentially with this hybrid thing, but also going towards text-based facilitation in what has traditionally been called managing communities, and managing the bits before and after the in the room facilitation? And to what extent do these digital tools allow us to do that in ways that we never could before, because our role began and ended where the people showed up and left. Now things are different.
And what comes to my mind, Judy, when I hear you speaking is actually, maybe it's not hybrid that we're talking about, but it's the dance between synchronous and asynchronous collaboration. So that we don't have to be in the same room together all the time just to collaborate, but what are the tools that we can use before this coming together, whether it is digital or analog, and what are the tools we need afterwards, even if we're not in the same room.
Definitely. Anyone like to add something here? We have questions still from the participants, and just as we talk about hybrid and preparing our profession for the future, Gary, how do you see the 3D immersive reality impacting in meetings? Because that's one of the questions we have here in the chat, and I think it amazes me the fact that we can have this experience like immersively. Do you think that will impact? Will happen fast?
No, it won't happen fast. It'll really, the big market for that is consumer based. So the first wave is in video gaming, right? Because that, if you look at, I think Myriam was the first one to talk about video gaming. I think a lot of people kind of look at video gaming as something that teenagers played in their house, you know, late at night when their parents didn't know, when in reality that market is actually larger than the Hollywood movie theater market. So it's interesting, and I don't know if it's this way in the rest of the world, but it used to be back when theaters were open that on Sunday afternoons or Monday mornings, the radio broadcast when you're driving to the office would say, and this weekend's big movies were, you know, the top blockbuster, the second and number third, and here's how many millions of dollars they made this weekend. When Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 or 4 came out, it made more money in 1 week than Titanic, the biggest grossing movie ever, made the entire time it was out in its initial release. The video game market is huge, so that the consumer segment is going to drive that. That's the first part that's going to come out. The second part is education. The second place you'll see VR and XR technology is education. So you'll see that in, you know, theoretically, a student who's sick and they want to still attend class can put on a VR headset, sit in the seat they normally theoretically sit in, and kind of be immersed in the class. Then the third level would be corporate and live events. It takes an enormous amount of technology, and the technology has to be dumbed down quite a bit because it's you're using multiple cameras and you're summing the information in real time. It takes a high-level processor, and the video gaming segment, you know, these are dedicated processors, single purpose appliances. So I think, although I love that concept of putting on a VR headset and sitting in a meeting, you're probably 2 to 3 years away from seeing that.
Okay, thanks for the answer. So in a hybrid scenario, Myriam and Judy, how do you see that we have a contribution to make as facilitators? Because it's so critical to have in a hybrid scenario the participants who are away feeling as engaged as the ones in the room.
My experience is that hybrid is hard, even with the most super technology and really excellent facilitators. Pilar Orti and I did an event at in London, actually not long, about a year ago, and we had this super fancy technology. Gary mentioned it earlier and I've forgotten the name of it again. Anyway, super fancy technology, everything super. We had a group of people in the room, group of people remote, and Pilar and I providing some kind of glue to connect them. But still, it came down to being a group online and a group in the room, and 2 facilitators pushing to connect those two. Until something very magical happens with the technology, I can't see how we can get in the room people and remote people to connect properly with each other through the bottleneck. In that particular event I'm talking about, it was held in an evening in a central London office. At a certain point, we sent all the in the room people off to different corners of the office to talk to their breakout group on their own laptop via Zoom, because it just, you know, we couldn't get through the bottleneck any other way. Somebody somewhere is going to have a clever idea, but I haven't got it yet. But meanwhile, we as facilitators are going to have, there's money to be made in being that bridge to help the bottleneck conversation happen. John Varney, you were there, weren't you, that day? Am I misremembering?
John, you want to step in your experience?
I don't think I was. I don't think that doesn't quite connect for me.
No,
Okay.
Maybe not.
Okay, Myriam, how about you, hybrid role of the facilitator?
I totally agree with Judy. I think that hybrid is close to impossible to be well done if we assuming that the aim of the workshop or the gathering is really the connection amongst people. I think if it's really just one-way communication, a presentation, it might not really matter. Last weekend I was attending a hybrid wedding, me being a guest on Zoom and some people being guests in the room attending the wedding. And I think it's simply not possible to have the same, you always exclude someone. And I think the breakthrough will then be VR glasses, where we can really, where it doesn't really matter whether we're in the same room or not, because it all seems as we were, and we can have these turn to your neighbor moments, because I think this is what is really missing right now, and that connects us. And from what I heard and maybe it's just wishful thinking, but I think we're closer to this VR reality for our gatherings than 2 to 3 years. But maybe Gary has more accurate data and insight.
Well, I mean, I think that VR and XR is definitely going to play a big part in it, and it's going to free up the capability. But at the same time, the comfort level, I mean, just how comfort is it to have headphones on all day long? It's hard. And these things are heavy, and the resolution matters, and are you using your phone or using a dedicated appliance? There's a lot of issues there that have to be solved. Can we do it in just a regular pair of glasses? And then you can't do anything else around you. Like even now, Judy can check her email while I'm talking, or I can, drink my coffee and, things like that. So it's different. But what I will say is that I teach millennials and generation. I've been teaching for 11 years, college, and I taught for 1 decade only millennials. Now in my class, I have a few millennials and mostly Generation Z, right? Because they're all going through college now. The Generation Z are all up 22 years old and younger. And I can tell you that the young millennials, meaning those that are under the age of 30 now, and the Generation Z are perfectly fine living completely in a digital collaborative world. They do not need in-person human interaction the way that we do, or the way that we grew up with it. And you've already seen this play out in your own lives, where you'll call your kid, they won't call you back, they'll text you back instead. And to them, it's the exact same thing as calling you. They equate a text message exactly the same level of quality and interpersonal reaction, relationship-wise, as a phone call. We don't, because we're older. They do because they're younger, and they grew up collaborating that way. They grew up talking to their friends that way. They grew up talking to their friends asynchronously. Listen, and what I mean by that is they will snap, record a video, send the video to their friend, and their friend will snap, record a video, and send it back. And it's asynchronous, but in their world, that's synchronous. It's the same, like we would call that asynchronous technologically, but in their world, that is synchronous. That is like normal communication. So as the population ages, all this stuff will become completely normalized for them. The problem is, how do you deal with it for anyone over the age of 30 right now?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gary, for these inputs. And my friends, we have to close this session in 10 minutes. And I'm thinking that our guest speakers should be exhausted. I don't want to leave this all group scenario without asking them for a final takeaway. Each one of the guest speakers on this conversation, what was your takeaway, guest speaker, so far? And then for the participants, I'm sure there's lots of debate going. I will be creating breakouts, this magic technology of Zoom. I will create breakouts for everybody to end this meeting in conversation, small group conversation, and I will kindly ask you all to fill in the stage 2 page on Keynote chat. But now, closing comments for our guest speakers. And let's use perhaps alphabetical order, which is normally the best option here. Gary, you will be the first then.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And it's been an honor to be here with Myriam and Judy. And I love the fact that we don't agree on everything, because then you get, as an audience, a better perspective, rather than if we were all sitting here saying this is the way it's going to go. Because now you have to leave thinking about what everyone had to say and then aggregating it and applying it to you specifically. So that's been fun. I would just say that keep an open mind, because I do think the one piece I would slightly disagree on, I agree with almost everything they said, would be that I think that technology is the solution to this. Like the COVID vaccine, which couldn't have been developed 10 years ago with the technology we had in the speed that we did. Technology solved that problem. Technology is going to solve the problem of opening up retail and restaurants with automation and temperature taking and things like that. I think collaboration, technology can solve this problem. We just have to be open to a difference of the way that we do things now.
Thank you so much, Kayye. Thank you for being here. And over to you, Judy.
I think Gary's spot on in saying that technology can solve the problem, but it's not about technology being opposed to people. Our job as facilitators is to make it easy for human beings to communicate with each other. Well, that may well mean that we as facilitators need to master more of the technology ourselves in order to be able to do more of that facilitation, whether that means adapting to a longer time frame rather than just the synchronous bit, or whether it means trying to crack the hybrid problem, which is non-trivial. So a lot of us have been trying to think about it for a lot of time. I think as facilitators, we're in a fantastic position to really do something amazing in the coming couple of years.
Thank you so much, Judy. Thank you for being here. And Myriam, over to you. Last but not least, the closing comments from guest speakers.
Building on that, and this is my takeaway why I really find this conversation so enriching. So thank you, Gary and Judy and Paul, for facilitating this. That we all agree on the core, but we disagree, as it seems, or our perspectives vary on the outlines. So I totally agree that the future is technology. Yes. Without technology, we won't be able to collaborate in times of challenges like COVID. And I wonder whether the future of facilitation is, or whether the answer is something that we have learned when PowerPoint suddenly started. I remember at uni when the first professor had PowerPoint, and suddenly this PowerPoint was dominating. And I think this was a challenge that many managers and team leaders had. So they went back to trainers and coaches to learn presentation skills so that they could dominate the presentation instead of the presentation dominating them. And this is the high art of presentation. And I think the future of facilitation is exactly that we won't be dominated by the tools we are using, that the tools of the technology companies won't impose their tools on us, but that we are in charge, maybe hopefully even co-developing with them, because I think it's an opportunity for the tech firms that they might be neglecting for now, is to actually access the community of facilitators to collaborate on the development. What is it actually that we need to facilitate collaboration in the future?
Thank you so much, Myriam, and thank you all participants for the lovely comments you are placing on chat. I'm delighted. So a round of applause, please. Let's visualize our gratitude to these speakers here, and thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. I'm glad we have it all recorded live on Facebook. And so now I think before closing the meeting, I'm starting breakout groups for everybody, please.